Welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our guest author is Amy Welborn, author of Come Meet Jesus, an invitation from Pope Benedict the 16th, published by the Word Among Us Press. Welcome, Amy, to EWTN's Bookmark.
Thanks, Doug.
Nice to have you here for the first time, at least on this program. You've been on other programs on EWTN over the years. I know on Jeanette Bankovic's show you've been on before.
You've been on Life on the Rock.
Right?
Yeah.
So some people will be familiar maybe with seeing you, but maybe more so from reading you, right? Not only in the written word in the sense of publishing books. How many books have you actually done?
I think 20, around 20, yeah.
20 books over a period of how many years? now?
About 12 years.
Right, but also maybe some of our younger viewers, even because you were one of the early pioneers really with Catholic blogging, right?
Yes, I was. Back in 2001, I had had an internet presence. I had a web page for a couple of years, and I became aware of this phenomenon of blogging, and it was a way to put fresh content online very easily without having to do a lot of coding or anything like that. And so I said, well, this is something I'd like to do. So it was in September 2001 actually that I started my blog as a way of sort of doing online columns and reaching out to readers that way.
For people who aren't familiar, what does blog even mean?
Blog is an abbreviation for web blog.
Okay.
And it's kind of a silly word, but it's an online journal and just a way of having an online presence in a way that's easy to update. You know, you don't have to know anything about programming or anything like that. You just sort of enter your, like you're writing an email. It's as easy as that.
It is, okay. Now, the other thing that's interesting, and I've noticed at least with your blogs over the years, is that you've kind of, in a sense, closed chapters and moved into other kinds of blogs. Why would someone do that? Why did you do that?
Well, that's a good question. My first blog was called In Between Naps. And I did that for a while, and part of the reason I changed into another blog called Open Book was that I wanted to change blogging software. That is, the company that provides the mechanism for blogging, I wanted to move to a different one. And so since I was having to do that, I just changed the name and sort of the focus of the blog a little bit. And then a few years after that, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I just got a little tired of the kind of blogging I was doing, which was very frequent. I would post, 8, 10 times a day. It was very news oriented. I would post entries on the news of the day and have lots of people commenting on my blog. And it was a sort of a day-long, even 24-hour conversation, and that took a toll. I got a little tired of that. And so I started another blog on another blogging platform. Charlotte Was Both is my current blog, which I don't blog as often. I don't even blog daily. I blog, maybe once a week. And it's more reflective. It's more sort of I have a lot of pictures and more not news oriented at all.
It almost seems to me in some ways that blogs have kind of evolved into somebody writes a blog as if they're writing a column, almost on an article, and where that kind of daily instantaneous stuff has been kind of taken over by Facebook or Twitter. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's very true. I don't have a very active Facebook presence. I mean, mine is mostly for my friends and family, but I know a lot of people who had smaller blogs and who have now sort of more completely moved to Facebook, where they have hundreds of friends and they have very active conversations about the news of the day on Facebook and Twitter, the same thing, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to this particular book, Come Meet Jesus, an invitation from Pope Benedict the 16th. When did you first meet Jesus?
My baptism in July 1960, a very long time ago. But I will talk about why I wrote this book, but the fundamental reason behind this book is that the writing and speaking of Pope Benedict the 16th has really touched me profoundly. And in a way that has sort of reawakened and reminded me of why and how I first met Jesus all those years ago.
Now, was it only when he became Pope that you recognized this, or did you recognize this when he was Cardinal Ratzinger?
Yeah, I wasn't a real big follower of Cardinal Ratzinger. I didn't really, I knew a little bit about him. I knew he was considered one of the great theologians of the 20th century. I knew that a lot of people didn't like him.
The Panzer Cardinal. And
that's right, God's Rottweiler and all of this kind of thing. And, quite honestly, given the people who didn't like him, I thought, well, he's probably
pretty good. He must be pretty good, right?
Yeah. And so, no, I hadn't really read much by him at all. before he was
Now,
elected.
in the introduction, you say, is it possible to pull a common thread from this rich, diverse body of works of his over the years? And you say that this book is the fruit of the conviction, I guess, that you can. What is the thread? Is the thread Jesus? Is that why the
Yeah, the
title's
thread is Christological.
Okay.
And the book, I just want to make sure everybody understands, is not the fruit of all of his theological works over the past 60 years. I culled it from what he has written as Pope for the past 5 years, or 4 at the time that I wrote the book. But I thought it was, as I read through his homilies, his general audiences, and even the background, his books, Introduction to Christianity and so on, it seemed to me it was a very clear thread in which he is calling all of us, all of his readers, his listeners, all people, Christian or not, to find their true selves, to find their salvation in Jesus Christ. And everything, church, culture, everything is oriented towards Christ.
Right. Now, you mentioned in the beginning also that in one of the quotes you have here about him referring to Pope John Paul II's 1978 inaugural homily, you talk about open wide the doors for Christ. How would you relate the two of them? How would you see Pope Benedict being different or the same as Pope John Paul II?
Well, I think they are the same in that they are both profoundly committed to Christ in a way in which, they very clearly and directly articulate that he is the reason for our existence, that he is our Savior, that he is our Redeemer, and that the whole world culminates, the cosmos culminates in Christ. When I read Pope John Paul II's writings, which I've just spent a little bit of time doing in preparation for another book, it comes out very clearly again. So, that focus on Christ is very clear. They're different, though, and as many people besides me have noted, in their academic background, John Paul II being of a philosophical background and Pope Benedict being a theologian. And they're a little different in their emphasis in that what I found is that Pope John Paul II was a very big thinker. And when he speaks in terms of big issues and what the world needs to see and what the church needs to be and what humanity needs to see. While Pope Benedict tends to always bring it down back all the time to your relationship to Christ as a human being. He really does constantly, no matter who he's talking to, whether it's priests, seminarians, other religious leaders, youth, it always comes back to Christ and your relationship to Christ.
Now, it's interesting because you kind of hear that personal relationship with Jesus was not a typical expression a Catholic, certainly growing up in my time period, the 50s, 60s, 70s. That was more of a Protestant way of thinking about it. How is those two fitting together in a Catholic context?
Well, Doug, I'm going to argue with you. I don't know. When I read traditional Catholic spirituality, whether it's of the big thinkers in Catholic spirituality or it's sort of traditional devotional manuals, I see a very profound call to individuals to have a relationship with Christ. You think about, a prayer that we still recite today, but that has its roots in the early modern period, Anima Christi. The post-communion prayer, soul of Christ, sanctify me, blood of Christ, inebriate me, calling, inviting Jesus into our hearts. So I don't know if there's that, discontinuity that we sometimes very easily talk about. But I think that what Benedict does is very interesting because he does call us very directly to a individual relationship with Christ, but at the same time, he never fails to tie it in to church, culture, sacramental life.
It's not just that. It's not limited
you
to
and Jesus, because
that might be the genesis of what comes out.
That's right. That's right. And he says very directly, he says, you can't have a relationship with Christ without the church. It's impossible because that's how we meet Christ, is through the church.
And is that, in your mind, what some of the problems are today with what people are trying to do? They're trying to do that, in fact?
Oh, yeah. And I think Absolutely. I mean, that whole dichotomy that people like to throw off. Oh, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious,
Yeah,
and
you
I
talk
don't.
about that in the book.
Yeah, and I don't need the church to find Christ or anything like that. What Benedict does over and over is to remind us that that's just not possible.
Well, you say, it is in Jesus, the Pope reminds us, that we find the peace for which our anxious, restless hearts yearn, kind of quoting Augustine in a sense. Is that what you found?
Personally?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. I have done a lot of things in my life, and married, children, worked in various capacities, and all of that kind of thing. And what I've found is that the world has a lot of answers to my questions. Too many answers. There are lots of forces out there that are competing for me to say yes to their answers. And I have found that I think the crisis of modern humanity, the existential crisis, is that there are all these answers, but it's almost, it's impossible to know which one is right. They all make their arguments. They all make their promises. And for me, what I found is the certainty, in the certainty of Jesus Christ through His church, is the only place to find lasting peace for me. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you're saying that. I'm thinking my son Matthew, who happens to be a high-functioning autistic, one time said, thank goodness I'm a Catholic, otherwise I wouldn't know what to believe. And that idea of really isolating the truth and focusing your belief system.
And I think that's interesting because, when I taught high school, which I did for a long time, I taught theology in Catholic high schools. One of the things that teenagers will say to you or ask you is, why do I have to go to Mass? Why do I have to go to confession? And I thought about this for a long time, and finally, came to a place where I would articulate to them, right away, it's not a have to thing, although it is, but you need to sort of reverse your thinking and see it as a gift. What a gift that I'm able to go to confession and know for certain that my sins have been forgiven. I don't have to carry that around. I don't have to wonder. I have heard the words of absolution. I know they have been forgiven. I can wander the world looking for God. What a relief to know that when I come to Mass and I receive Jesus in the Eucharist, He's there. That's a gift. And so I think your son is exactly right.
Right. Now, in the beginning of the book, you have a section kind of meeting Pope Benedict, just to give some background, because you thought it was important people understood his background, right?
Yes.
Why was that important?
Well, because there are so many myths about his background, so many...
the Hitler Youth kind
the
of
Hitler
thing?
Youth kind of thing. So many misconceptions. I thought it was really important that, for example, I think the other misconception out there is that Pope Benedict's program, as it is rooted in nothing more than nostalgia. He still wishes it was the good old days.
Pre-Vatican II.
Yeah, that he still wishes for the the traditional church that he grew up with in the 20s and 30s in Germany, that Bavarian Catholicism, and that's all it is. That's all this is about. And part of what I wanted to articulate in the introduction, first of all, was to point people to really try to understand what he says about his youth and the way he was formed spiritually, which is very authentic and profound and deep. And it's not just about smells and bells and ritual. It's about meeting Christ.
Right.
And through the devotions and the sacramental life that he experienced as a youth, and also to clear up those misconceptions about him and his relationship to Germany and the Reich and all of that kind of thing.
At the end of that, chapter 1, you say, as we read Pope Benedict's words in the next few chapters, we will encounter his concern to protect and preserve the faith. That is his major concern in your mind?
I think so, yes. I mean, I think that obviously, he has ministered to the church in various capacities as an academic, as a bishop, and working in the Curia during a time of great turmoil in the church. And he has seen it all and heard it all.
Right.
And he knows how messed up we are when we, even when we're working in the church, how messed up we are when we turn from Christ and put our own agenda at the forefront instead of the agenda of the gospel and of the church. And, he you know, if you believe that Jesus Christ is the salvation of humanity, and if you believe that his church is the place where he is found and the way he works in the world, yeah, you know, that's going to be your orientation.
Now, in chapter 2, you deal with what you call meeting ourselves, and you say, listening to what Pope Benedict has to say about the role of Jesus in the life of a Christian disciple has been bracing, eye-opening, and a little distressing. How so?
Because he challenges. You know, he challenges us. And I think one of the things I like about the way Pope Benedict speaks about Christ is that he always speaks of the life of the disciple as an adventure. And it's one of his themes that he comes back to. But that also the beginnings of this journey as a disciple can upset us because, you know, when you read the Gospels, people leave everything. Their lives are completely changed by Jesus Christ, by following Jesus Christ. And I think that, you know, what Pope Benedict sees in the church often is a sense of complacency that, you know, Jesus and the church and the rituals of the church and the sacramental life of the church and our parish life exists to confirm us in our, you know, in our lifestyle,
Right.
in our comfort in the culture, in our sort of letting ourselves being absorbed into the culture. And so when we listen to Christ, we are challenged, and if we're really listening, we should be maybe a little distressed.
Right, you make a couple of points in this.
Yeah.
You talk about faith is primarily private and subjective, not that it is, but that's the way the culture sees it. One spiritual journey is about finding an internal space of emotional affirmation, fulfillment. One spiritual journey is also about being enabled and empowered to succeed, achieve, and accomplish.
Right.
You got several other ones there. It strikes me too with that. Sometimes I think, you know, people aren't interested in listening. I always think because maybe Jesus is going to ask you to do something you don't want to do.
Exactly.
On the other side, there can be a very popularized spirituality that we hear, which is somewhat of a health and wealth gospel, which is like, well, if you do these things, then everything's going to be wonderful.
Right.
Well, that's not the Catholic perspective. And
No.
so people start to wonder, why do I want to go down this road?
And the Catholic perspective is also not that everything's going to be wonderful on earth. I know, I think Father Benedict Groeschel likes to say the only thing that Jesus promised his disciples about their life on earth is that they're going to suffer. And, you know, this is something that Pope Benedict alludes to all the time. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. It does, you know, Catholics don't do, you know, health and wealth gospel, but one of the things we do is we talk a lot about our gifts and talents and being fulfilled, and that's sort of the purpose of the Christian life, is to be fulfilled and to feel okay about ourselves and to feel that we're in a place where we can live out our gifts and talents and be affirmed and all that. Well, when I read the Gospels, I don't see that.
Okay.
You know, what I see is Jesus calling us to serve whoever is in front of us right now. You know, I may have gifts and talents as, say, a writer, but, you know, and I may feel that the best way for me to do that, to live that out, is to, you know, go off in a cabin by the sea and write novels. But you know what? I got kids. I can't do that. I got to serve them. You know, I don't know if anybody has a particular gift and talent for working, you know, in the nursing home bathroom, but somebody's got to do it.
Right.
Because these people are Christ. And so, you know, I think sometimes when we talk about ourselves in that way,
Right.
we're sort of, again, conveniently shutting Jesus out. And because Jesus is, I think, is calling us to, you know,
Right.
serve whoever.
Well, I always think of Bishop Sheen when he was studying. He really thought his call was to be, you know, a professor, and they said, well, you're not going to do that. We're going to send you to a parish for a while,
Right.
because the bishop wanted to see whether he would be obedient,
Right.
and to learn that you have to go where you're sent,
Exactly.
in a sense, right?
And I think, you know, Pope Benedict, again, his life is a perfect example of that too, because, you know, he was called to work for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, and he would repeatedly go to the Holy Father
Right.
and say, can I go back to Germany now? And the Holy Father would say, no, I need you. You know, I need you to be here. And, you know, he has written himself many times and spoken quite, you know, sweetly, really, about how after the Holy Father died, he was really looking forward to moving back to Germany, setting up house with his brother, and being able to read and write and think for the rest of his life. And then he gets elected Pope himself. He's called to serve, so it doesn't matter what he wants. And so, that's, besides what he has written, his witness to me of very humble, willing service has been a real witness to me as well.
It says here, Pope Benedict invites us to recognize that this faith we profess may not be about what we thought it was. It's not about obligations and rules. It's not about fitting in culturally or socially. It's not about controlling our kids' behavior. It's not about living by some helpful ideas that may be good for you, but not so great for me.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you're talking about.
And that's, I think for a lot of us, that's what religion is. It's a useful way of social control. It's a, it's a way to feel that we're okay in the world.
Now, did you actually meet Jesus in a dentist's office, or why was that an important? Usually when people are thinking, usually the Hail Mary comes to mind, sitting in the dentist chair. But you have a connection here in chapter 3 about meeting Jesus in the meaning of life, and you talk about being in a dentist's office. What's the connection?
This was the story there about the woman? Yes, okay. Several years ago, I was at the dentist. I was waiting to go in. And I think I was probably feeling sorry for myself about something or other. And this woman came in, very disheveled and distraught. And she went up to the receptionist. And she said, I have an appointment today. And the receptionist looked and said, no, you don't. She looked and she said, it's next week or last week, It's not today. And the woman just said, I had a baby last week. The baby died. My head's just not right. And she rushed out. And first of all, it put anything that I was, quote, suffering into perspective. But I think what it also told me and taught me in a very profound way is that there is such suffering walking around in people. Somebody said, be kind, for everyone you know everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. Everyone that we see on the street, in the store, is on their own personal journey. God is working in their lives somehow. And, Jim and Joy Pinto have their prayer about the face of Christ, the face of Christ prayer.
They do a radio show.
Yeah,
for us,
yes. And that's a beautiful prayer, which I think articulates this as well, is that, the face of Christ, to see everyone as the face of Christ, everyone that we meet. And there is such drama being played out, individual drama being played out in everybody that we meet. And our call, I think, is to be able to see Christ in that.
Now, do you think some of the things going on, the trouble with society today is that people are under the impression that there's some great party out there that they're missing out, and they've got this poor life, and if they could only do this, do this, somehow their life would be better, and if it's not being better, they have to cast everything off?
Yeah, I think that media and the fact that we can turn on our computer or our TV and see how green the grass is everywhere else in the world, it really leads to sort of a pervasive dissatisfaction. And I think this is something that philosophers have noted for many decades since the expansion of mass media. Sometimes I think, wouldn't I be happier if I just lived in a village and I didn't know what anybody else around the world was doing or where they were going? Because, but that is the sort of the purpose of mass media, which is to create needs within us that have to be met by us buying stuff. And this is something that Pope Benedict addresses over and over again, in that, it's that interesting tension between finding Christ in the world, because we are an incarnational people. Jesus came into the world and we meet Christ in the world, but at the same time, as Augustine says, loving the things of the world according to how they should be loved. And to just, what Pope Benedict, I think, calls us to is to focus on Christ where he is in my life today. And to have...
Or where he's not.
Yeah, or where he's not.
And maybe where he should be.
Right, exactly. And to have faith that Christ is waiting for me here. That I don't have to, I may have to change. I'm probably going to have to change, but I don't have to, take a big journey. I don't have to sort of buy into anything else except Jesus.
Right. Now, in the chapter Meeting Jesus in the Life of the Church, under Spread the Good News, you make this point. So to meet Jesus, we come to him through his church. Now, you alluded to that before. You said that's what the Pope says. But why is that true? And why does it have to be that way?
Well, and this is very important. And when you read the Holy Father's writings, say his general audiences, for the past couple of years, past 3 years, Benedict has been using the general audiences as a way of teaching us about saints, about great people in the church. He started with the apostles, then he's done the Greek and the Latin fathers, he's done the series on women in the church, and so on. And when he spoke on the apostles for those months that he was doing that, he made this point over and over again, is that because of the apostles, we know Christ. Because the apostles, of course, are the witnesses to Christ, and the church comes out of that witness. And so, it's not an either-or thing. Right. The only way that I know about Jesus is because I was baptized, and because I was taught, and because I have the scriptures, which are the root of the church.
Right, which you can trust the church to present to you.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. We're just out of time. Thanks Amy.
Doug.
Good
Thanks
luck, and keep up the good work. Speaking here with the author, Amy Welborn, author of Come Meet Jesus, an invitation from Pope Benedict XVI, and it's published by the Word Among Us Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Check it out, and check us out next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.